They say paradise belongs to everyone but in Jamaica. Even paradise now has a price. What if you were born on the island? Your ancestors tilled its soil, your grandmother fished its waters, and yet one morning you walk to the sea and a guard tells you, you can't enter here. This beach is private. Stay till the end of this story. What you'll discover will break your heart and open your eyes. It began quietly, years ago. At first, locals didn't notice. A little fence here, a new resort there, a few no trespassing signs on the coastline. They said it was just to protect tourists. But the fences grew taller, the signs grew bolder. Then came the final insult, the words that sparked fury across the island. No Jamaicans allowed beyond this point. The photos went viral. A group of young students from Montego Bay had tried to spend a Sunday afternoon at a nearby beach they had visited all their lives. The guard stopped them. He pointed to a list. Only resort guests. Foreign nationals only, one girl cried. She was barefoot, holding her flip-flops. But me born ya, she said softly. The guard didn't move. Within hours, the story exploded online. Jamaicans everywhere were furious. The island's beaches, once free, open, and filled with the sounds of drums and laughter, had become luxury playgrounds fenced off for foreigners. But what no one knew yet was how it happened. A journalist named Rohan Walters started digging. What he found would later be called the Blue Sands Conspiracy. Rohan's investigation began with one simple question. Who really owns Jamaica's beaches? He requested public records, expecting to find government titles or tourism ministry files. Instead, he found something strange. Most beaches were listed under shell companies, small firms registered in Cayman Islands, Luxembourg, or Delaware. The names were vague: Blue Sands Limited, Tropic Holdings, Sunsea Development Corp. None of them had Jamaican owners. When Rohan traced one of the addresses, it led to a building in London with 300 other offshore companies. Then came his first big break. An anonymous email landed in his inbox with the subject line, "Look at Project Sandglass." Attached was a confidential document, a tourism diversification agreement, signed by the Jamaican Ministry of Land and a private investment group known as Carib West Partners. The deal, dated 10 years earlier, quietly allowed foreign investors to manage, secure, and develop coastal properties for international hospitality interests. In simple language, it gave them permission to own the coastline. The clause that shocked Rohan most read, "Local access may be restricted for reasons of guest safety, brand integrity, and investor confidence." He read it twice. Brand integrity? Investor confidence? Those were just polite ways of saying, keep Jamaicans out. Rohan published the story. Within 24 hours, government officials called it fake news. But soon, former tourism workers began contacting him privately. One woman sent him photos of secret meetings at a Montego Bay villa between foreign investors and Jamaican politicians. Then she disappeared. 2 weeks later, Rohan received a flash drive from an unknown courier. No name, no note, just 3 words written on the envelope. The real owners. As besiven, the files on it were explosive scanned passports, emails, wire transfers. The documents showed that the real shareholders behind the beach companies were not just tourists or businessmen. They were former diplomats, European billionaires, and even a few Jamaican ministers themselves hiding behind foreign names. Rohan realized this wasn't just about beaches. It was about control. In one email, a British investor wrote to a Jamaican official, "We need to limit local interference along the north coast. Keep it clean, exclusive. That's what our clients pay for." Another investor replied, "Of course, the locals will have their public beaches somewhere else." Somewhere else. That's how it began, slowly pushing ordinary Jamaicans away from the best coastlines, claiming it was for development. But the next document would send shockwaves across the Caribbean. Rohan opened a file titled Phase 3, Coastal Rezoning. It listed 27 beaches, each marked with codes, red stamps, and planned future ownership transfers to offshore entities. The government was preparing to sell half of Jamaica's coastline to foreign investors by 2030. And the final page carried the Prime Minister's signature, the same Prime Minister who had stood on national TV, smiling, promising, a brighter tourism future for all Jamaicans. Rohan couldn't believe what he was reading. He called a friend in the ministry who whispered, "Brother, you don't know the half of it." They even plan to make access roads private too. They want to turn the whole north coast into a gated paradise without Jamaicans. But that wasn't the most shocking part. When Rohan compared the foreign companies' names to public data, he found that many of them had connections to European banks and hotel chains accused of exploiting local workers in Africa and Asia. It was the same colonial system, only with new paperwork. He printed everything, stored the files in a secret folder, and began preparing a report he would release online called "Born in Jamaica, Banned from the Beach." But that night, his car was followed. Then his apartment was broken into. The files were gone, his laptop missing, and the next morning he received a call from an unknown number. The voice on the line said, "You should stop asking who owns the beaches. The sea can drown secrets too." Then the line went dead. That was the moment Rohan realized he had uncovered something much bigger than land theft, something political, something global. And he wasn't going to stop, because now he knew the truth. Jamaica hadn't lost its beaches overnight. They were taken piece by piece by men who smiled for cameras, shook hands in suits, and sold the island's soul for money they'd never spend at home. The next leak he found would name them all. And when he published it, the whole world, from Kingston to London, would finally see how deep the betrayal went. Rohan didn't sleep that night. Every sound outside his window made his heart race, a car door slamming, a phone buzzing, the hum of a motorbike passing by. He knew he was being watched, but something in him refused to stop. He kept whispering to himself, "Dem Sian silence truth." He moved into a small apartment on the outskirts of Spanish Town, using public Wi-Fi to avoid being traced. From there, he began digging deeper into what was now known online as Number Beachgate. People all over the island were sending him tips. Some came from hotel workers, others from government clerks tired of the lies. One message stood out. It was from a man who called himself K2. "I have something you need to see," the message read. "Meet me at Cane River Falls. Don't bring your phone." Rohan hesitated but went. He waited near the waterfall, where the sound of crashing water drowned every whisper. A tall man wearing sunglasses and a fisherman's hat appeared. Without a word, he handed Rohan a brown envelope, then disappeared into the trees. Inside were copies of internal memos marked "Confidential, Ministry of Investment." The memos were dated 3 years earlier and mentioned a mysterious initiative called Project Shoreline Renewal, funded by a coalition of international partners. Rohan scanned the pages and his blood ran cold. One line said, "Local populations within coastal areas will be relocated under the Urban Expansion Act. Compensation will be symbolic, but priority will be given to foreign investors aligned with the national development vision." Relocated? Symbolic compensation? He read on. The investors included companies from Canada, the UK, the US, and even Dubai. The document mentioned training programs that promised jobs for locals, but in reality, these were low-wage cleaning and security positions in resorts built on land that once belonged to Jamaicans. In short, Jamaica's beaches were being sold under the name of progress. Rohan knew he had to confirm the authenticity of the memos. He reached out to an old friend, Marcia Blake, a legal advisor who once worked for the Ministry of Tourism. When she saw the papers, her hands shook. "Oh God, Rohan," she whispered. "This is the real thing. They've been hiding this for years. I saw the first draft back in 2016. "Who approved it?" Rohan asked. She hesitated, then said, "The PM's office, and an international foundation based in Washington called the Global Island Fund. They're the ones financing the deals." Rohan looked confused. "But why would an NGO fund resort takeovers?" Marcia sighed. "Because they're not really an NGO. The Global Island Fund is a front. Behind them, the same corporations that control tourism in the Seychelles, the Maldives, and parts of Africa. Jamaica is just the next prize." That night, Rohan couldn't stop thinking about her words. The next prize. A few days later, he received another leak, this time from a customs officer at the Kingston port. The officer claimed containers labeled as building materials were arriving under diplomatic protection and transported straight to restricted coastal areas. Rohan went to the port disguised as a warehouse assistant. What he saw shocked him. Men with foreign accents were unloading equipment that didn't look like construction tools. It looked like surveillance gear and heavy-duty fences. He took photos and videos, uploading them to a cloud drive. But before he could leave, a security guard spotted him. He ran, dodging through crates and workers until he slipped through a gap in the fence. The chase left him shaken, but he had proof now. The beaches weren't just being privatized, they were being militarized. That evening, he went live on his secret YouTube channel, Truth Talk 876, broadcasting his findings. Thousands tuned in. His voice trembled, but stayed strong. They are building invisible walls around our coasts. They call it development, but it's occupation. Our beaches are gone, sold under secret agreements, and those who protest are treated like criminals in their own land. Within hours, the government dismissed his claims as irresponsible journalism. But the next morning, police raided several fishing villages near Ocho Rios and removed locals for trespassing on resort property. The people finally realized Rohan was telling the truth. Protests erupted across the island. Students blocked roads with signs reading, "Mi born ya, mi own ya." Rastafarians chanted freedom songs on the shores. Elders cried, remembering when every child could run into the sea without permission. International media began covering the story. CNN called it the Beach Apartheid Scandal. Al Jazeera aired an exposé titled Jamaicans Banned from Their Own Paradise. But just as the story went global, Rohan vanished. No one saw him leave his apartment. His car was still there. His phone found in a river. And then, out of nowhere, an anonymous video appeared online, a grainy clip showing Rohan sitting in a dark room, his face bruised. "They don't want you to know the truth," he whispered. "It's not about tourism. It's about control. Look into the Crown Estate files." The video cut off. That was the last anyone saw of him. The phrase Crown Estate files sent shockwaves through Jamaican media. Independent journalists began investigating, and what they found next made even the strongest patriots sick. The beaches weren't just owned by random foreigners. Many were under long-term leases, controlled by companies linked to the British Crown's overseas real estate holdings. It meant that Jamaica's most famous beaches, from Negril to Ocho Rios, were being run through networks tied to the same empire that once colonized the island. The circle had closed. Colonialism hadn't died, it had just changed its name. And as new protests filled the streets, one chilling question spread like wildfire across Jamaica. If we can't touch our own sand, are we really free? When news of the Crown Estate files broke, the island shook like a nation waking from a long dream. Old men who once worked the sugar estates wept on live TV. Radio stations played Bob Marley's Redemption song nonstop. But the government stayed silent. Then, one Friday morning, a press conference was announced. Prime Minister Andre Holness appeared on screen, wearing a calm smile, his hands clasped like a man rehearsed for confession. "Let me assure Jamaicans," he began, "that no beaches have been sold. Our goal is modernization, sustainable tourism that benefits all." But before he could continue, a journalist from an independent online outlet shouted, "So why are people being arrested for walking on them?" The Prime Minister paused, then smiled again. "We have laws, and laws must be respected." It was a cold answer. The room went silent. Meanwhile, deep in the corporate heart of Kingston, a small office inside a tall glass building hummed with air conditioning and quiet secrets. The brass plate outside read, "Caribdev Holdings Limited." It was one of the shell companies named in the Crown Estate files. Officially, it was a real estate consultancy. In truth, it was a front for Western corporations buying Jamaican land through proxies. And the biggest name linked to it? A British businessman, knighted by the Crown, Sir Alistair Morton. According to leaked emails, Morton's company owned 73% of the land under construction in the Golden Coast Development Zone. He called Jamaica a profitable frontier. But what Rohan's earlier research never revealed, what no one yet knew, was that some Jamaican officials were secretly shareholders in Caribdev. Among them were 2 members of parliament, 1 media tycoon, and a senior cabinet minister. Their names appeared in the leaked documents, beside offshore bank accounts in Cayman Islands and Zurich. Then, out of nowhere, an encrypted message appeared on Marsha Blake's computer. It read, "You're next. Stop digging into Karabdev. This is bigger than you think." She didn't sleep for 2 days. Then she packed her bags and fled to Cuba. Before leaving, she uploaded everything she found, nearly 2,000 pages of classified contracts and emails, to a public drive under the title The Paradise Papers, Jamaica Edition. Within hours, the documents went viral. They revealed shocking details. Western companies were paying just $1 US per square meter for prime coastal land. Meanwhile, local fisher families were forced to relocate inland, given $100 in compensation and a warning not to return. And worse, an undisclosed stability clause in the contracts meant that Jamaica couldn't change or cancel these deals for 99 years. When the people saw the truth, the island erupted. Kingston, Montego Bay, and Port Antonio turned into waves of human fire. People marched barefoot to the gates of luxury resorts, shouting, "We want back We Beach!" Police tried to push them back. But for every tear gas canister fired, 10 more protesters appeared. The government tried to shut down social media, but telegram channels and community radio kept the fire alive. Then came a moment that no one expected. A video emerged from Africa President Ibrahim Traoré of Burkina Faso, speaking at a Pan-African conference. His voice was calm but thunderous. If a nation cannot touch its own sand, it is not free. If its people must pay to feel their sea, then its independence was only written, not lived. The clip went viral in Jamaica. Suddenly, murals of Traoré appeared on Kingston walls beside Marcus Garvey and Nanny of the Maroons. Jamaicans began calling him Brother Traoré from the motherland. The connection between Africa and the Caribbean was reignited not by politicians, but by shared pain. A week later, an anonymous insider, possibly from within the government, leaked audio recordings of private meetings between Jamaican officials and executives of a U.S. real estate fund. In one clip, a man identified as a senior minister could be heard saying, "Let the people protest. They'll cool off once we open new hotel jobs." The executive laughed. And the land titles? Don't worry. By the time they notice, it'll be too late. The audio exploded online. Jamaican youths renamed it the Judas Tape. But the story didn't end there. Late one night, an encrypted message was sent from a government server to an unknown foreign address. It contained a single PDF, a top-secret emergency deal codenamed Project Phoenix. Its goal? To lease parts of Jamaica's north coast to a private U.S. security firm for maritime protection. But the real plan was darker. The firm would control shipping routes and monitor digital communications across the Caribbean in exchange for development aid. Essentially, Jamaica's sovereignty was being auctioned under another name. The leak hit global news. Caribbean leaders stayed silent. But within Jamaican villages, something ancient was stirring anger mixed with faith. Fishermen swore to sail no matter the fences. Elders began gathering in circles again, lighting fires, singing old maroon war songs. The message was clear. We coming for we see. And deep in the shadows, those who orchestrated the deals began to panic, because what they feared most wasn't exposure. It was unity. The night Kingston exploded began quietly. The moon hung low, pale over the harbor, and the sound of drums echoed from a nearby gully. It started as a gathering students, fishermen, taxi drivers, and elders, but it became something far greater. Thousands flooded into the streets, carrying torches and flags. They weren't just protesting anymore, they were declaring a second independence. From the rooftops came a chant that spread like fire. The beach belongs to the people, not the thieves. By midnight, the police had lost control of several districts. Roadblocks made of burning tires cut off access to resort zones. Banners with the faces of Marcus Garvey, Sam Sharp, and Ibrahim Traoré fluttered in the smoke. A journalist broadcasting live shouted into her phone, "This is no longer a protest. This is history happening in front of us." Inside Jamaica House, the cabinet met in secret. The atmosphere was tense. Aides rushed between rooms, carrying folders stamped classified. "Project Phoenix is compromised," one advisor whispered. "We can't allow the files to go public," said another. The Prime Minister sat still, sweating under the air conditioner. "How bad is it?" he asked. A security officer replied, "Sir, if these leaks continue, Washington will pull out, London will suspend funding, and the IMF—" "Forget the IMF!" the PM shouted. "What do we do now?" But no one had an answer. Then, out of nowhere, a man entered quietly, an American in a dark suit with no name badge. His voice was calm. "Gentlemen, the embassy is prepared to assist. We suggest a media blackout. If that fails, consider emergency powers." Everyone froze. The implication was clear. Declare martial law. The PM hesitated. "This is Jamaica," he said softly. "We can't turn guns on our people." The American smiled thinly. "You don't have to. Just let us handle security along the coast." That was the true face of Project Phoenix, not protection, but occupation, disguised as partnership. Meanwhile, across the city, Marcia Blake had returned from Cuba in secret. Using an encrypted laptop, she uploaded another batch of documents. Emails between Jamaican officials and executives from a Florida-based private military company called Ocean Guard. The emails revealed that Ocean Guard had already shipped armored patrol boats to Jamaica under the pretense of coastal defense training. But the real plan, according to one email, was to maintain order during expected civilian unrest. Marcia stared at the screen in disbelief. They were preparing to crush their own people. She sent the files to a global whistleblower network, the same one that once exposed tax havens. Within hours, the world saw it. Screenshots of ministers approving military partnerships against their citizens. The hashtag number #JamaicaLeaks trended worldwide. Then came the twist that no one saw coming. In a hidden corner of the Caribbean, an encrypted video feed appeared online. It showed a dark conference room with flags from multiple countries, the U.S., the U.K., Canada, and Jamaica among them. A PowerPoint slide on the wall read, "Phase 3 Resource Realignment." A voice explained, "Tourism control was just the first stage. The next step is sand extraction and offshore mineral leasing. Jamaica's seabed contains rare minerals used in advanced technology. The goal is to secure exclusive rights before 2030. The room fell silent. This was the real reason behind the fences, the fake beach deals, the security zones. It wasn't just about tourism. It was about the resources buried under Jamaica's waters. The same pattern seen in Africa, Asia, and the Pacific, now unfolding in the Caribbean. And somewhere in the back of that leaked footage, a familiar figure sat quietly, half hidden in shadow. Sir Alistair Morton. He wasn't just buying beaches. He was helping foreign corporations steal the ocean floor. When the leak spread, the people's anger turned into purpose. Across the island, community leaders, Maroons, and Rastas gathered in circles. "If the sea is our gold, then we defend it like warriors," said an elder in a kampong. A movement began. The Sand Rebellion. Fishermen pledged to blockade resort areas by boat. Farmers offered food to protesters. Even police officers began quietly leaking information. And at the center of it all, a message from Ibrahim Traoré resurfaced on Jamaican radio, broadcast by unknown sources. "Freedom is not given, it is taken. The same wind that carried your ancestors across the Atlantic now carries your courage back to them. Stand up, Jamaica. Africa watches you." The streets roared. It felt as if history itself had returned, the ghosts of the Maroons, the rebels, the enslaved, all marching again. But while the people prepared to reclaim their beaches, the elites prepared their escape. Private jets were refueled. Offshore accounts were emptied. And deep beneath the calm waves off Montego Bay, foreign ships had already begun extracting the island's sand under cover of darkness. The war for Jamaica's freedom had already begun, and most of the world didn't even know it. By dawn, the island was trembling with tension. The Sand Rebellion had spread from Montego Bay to Ocho Rios, Portmore, and even to the hills of Street Mary. Roads were blocked, beaches occupied, and flags waved high above crowds, singing "Jamaica Nah, Sell Out." But behind the roar of the people, darker plans were unfolding in boardrooms thousands of miles away. In London, inside a quiet office on the 10th floor of a grey stone building, Sir Alistair Morton was in a meeting with two men from an energy conglomerate. On the table lay a map of Jamaica marked with red lines along the north coast. Each red zone was labeled with a small code PZ1, PZ2, PZ3. "These are the extraction points," Morton said in a clipped tone. "Cobalt and tellurium, extremely valuable for renewable technologies. The locals think we're building resorts." The others laughed. One of them asked, "And what about the protests?" Morton smirked. "We control their loans, their banks, their ports. They can shout all they want. When the time comes, they'll have no choice but to bend." He poured himself a drink and raised the glass. "To the empire that never ends." But he didn't know that the entire meeting, every word, every laugh, was being recorded by a hidden whistleblower working as a cleaner in that very building. The recording would soon become the most explosive leak in Jamaican history. 2 days later, the leak hit the internet under the title The Empire Blueprint. It exposed secret meetings between British financiers, U.S. tech companies, and Jamaican officials. The documents showed that beneath the new resorts, foreign companies had discovered massive reserves of rare minerals in Jamaica's seabed minerals used in batteries, AI chips, and renewable energy systems. The tourism projects were just cover operations. Worse yet, a signed memorandum showed that Jamaica's government had agreed to a 100-year mineral lease, granting these companies full control of offshore resources in exchange for sustainable development aid. In plain English, Jamaica's ocean wealth had been sold for pennies. The country erupted again. Protesters marched with banners that read, "We are not for sale. Our sand, our blood, our future." International journalists arrived by the dozens. For the first time, the world was seeing Jamaica not as a vacation spot, but as a battlefield of modern colonialism. In Washington, panic spread. The U.S. State Department released a statement claiming that foreign interference was destabilizing the Caribbean. They called the leaks Russian propaganda. But Jamaican activists responded online, "If the truth comes from Moscow, London, or the moon, it's still the truth." Even CNN, under pressure, finally aired a segment titled Jamaica's Hidden Resource War. The reporter ended the piece with a chilling line, "It seems independence was never truly granted, only delayed." That night, a storm hit the island, but the people didn't go inside. They stood in the rain, guarding the beaches, chanting the names of heroes. In one unforgettable moment, a young fisherman walked into the waves, carrying a Jamaican flag. He planted it into the wet sand and shouted, "If dem want de sand, dem haffy tek me wid it." The crowd roared. Videos of that moment flooded the internet. Within days, it became the symbol of the rebellion. Even in Africa, the clip went viral. People in Burkina Faso, Ghana, and Nigeria shared it under one message: Jamaica stands with Africa. Africa stands with Jamaica. But while the world watched the protests, another revelation dropped, one that changed everything. An internal letter from the British Foreign Office surfaced. It was addressed to the Jamaican Prime Minister months before the scandal began. It read, "We understand the sensitivity of the project. Ensure all documentation remains classified. Should unrest occur, the Royal Navy's Caribbean Task Force is prepared to offer logistical support." Logistical support. That meant British military presence ready to intervene if Jamaicans resisted. It was the proof everyone feared. The beach deals were not just economic exploitation. They were part of a geopolitical plan to secure the Caribbean as a Western resource hub in the coming global crisis. The revelation hit like thunder. Jamaicans across generations, from uptown professionals to rural farmers, realized they had been trapped in a web of deceit spanning decades. Banks, laws, media, all built to keep them obedient. But the people were changing. The rebellion had awakened something ancient, the same spirit that led slaves to burn plantations, the same fire that made Maroons fight British troops in the mountains. And for the first time in generations, the people were no longer afraid. They were ready to fight for what was theirs, not with guns, but with truth, unity, and global solidarity. Still, whispers spread through the crowds. Where is Rohan, the one who started it all? No one knew. But one night, a strange message appeared on social media. It came from an anonymous account, but it bore Rohan's old signature phrase, Dem Sian Silence Truth. Attached was a link. When opened, it showed a live feed of a dark storage room somewhere near the coast, filled with boxes labeled Crown Estate Archives Confidential. And behind the boxes, a man's silhouette appeared briefly before the feed went dark. The caption read, "Everything you need to free Jamaica is here." The island held its breath. Something massive was coming, because now the truth wasn't just about beaches. It was about the soul of Jamaica itself. And as the movement spread across the Caribbean, even the powerful began to tremble, because the people were no longer asking for permission. They were taking back their land, their sea, and their story. The morning after the mysterious video dropped, Jamaica woke up in silence. No one went to work. No one opened their shops. The whole island seemed to hold its breath. Then, like a wave, word spread across every street and every district. The archives exist. The proof is real. Hundreds of people marched toward the coastal area, shown in the leaked video a warehouse near Falmouth. Farmers left their fields, teachers abandoned classrooms, and young men from Kingston's ghettos rode in trucks and on bikes, waving flags and shouting, "We want the truth." By the time the crowd reached the old port road, there were thousands. The police tried to block them, but even the officers hesitated. Many of them had family among the protesters. A single shout broke the tension. "If we were born in Jamaica, we have a right to know what they did to Jamaica." The gates burst open. Inside the warehouse, stacks of boxes lay covered in dust. People ripped them open and gasped. There were contracts, letters, receipts, even photos of officials shaking hands with foreign businessmen. One photo showed Prime Minister Holness and Sir Alistair Morton signing a secret memorandum dated years earlier, long before the supposed development project began. The signature line read, "For the joint administration of Jamaica's coastal assets." The crowd fell into stunned silence. Then someone shouted, "So dem sell out long time." That moment, that collective realization changed everything. Within hours, the documents were being scanned and shared online. The world watched in shock as Jamaica's darkest secret unfolded live across social media. CNN, BBC, and Al Jazeera were forced to cover it. Headlines flashed. Jamaica leaks expose global exploitation network. British firms named in colonial-style land grabs. Caribbean resource theft scandal expands. But inside Jamaica, chaos was brewing. Foreign investors began evacuating their families. Luxury resorts locked their gates. Helicopters hovered over the coast as panic gripped the elite. The government declared a state of emergency, but by then, it was too late. From Kingston to Negril, the people were already reclaiming their beaches. Barriers were torn down, resort fences fell. Children ran into the sea barefoot, laughing and crying at the same time. It wasn't just protest anymore, it was liberation. Then came the biggest twist of all. Marcia Blake, the journalist who started the first investigation, appeared live on an independent Caribbean network. Her voice trembled as she read from a newly decrypted document, one marked Top Secret Commonwealth Joint Program. According to it, the Golden Coast deal was not only approved by Jamaica's government, but coordinated through a hidden branch of the Commonwealth Development Office. Its mission was to ensure cooperative control of emerging mineral economies in the Caribbean, and quote, "We have self." In simple terms, Jamaica's independence had been an illusion all along. For 60 years, decisions about land, water, and resources were quietly made in foreign boardrooms, not in Kingston. The revelation broke people's hearts. But it also opened their eyes. The next morning, something extraordinary happened. The Jamaican Defense Force, instead of arresting protesters, joined them. Soldiers took off their helmets and stood beside fishermen, teachers, and farmers. One officer raised his rifle skyward and shouted, "This weapon should defend Jamaica, not protect thieves." The crowd roared. All across the island, military bases lowered the government flag and raised the black, green, and gold in its place, a symbol of the people's true sovereignty. For the first time since independence, Jamaicans controlled their own land again. That same evening, as the sun dipped into the sea, a massive crowd gathered on the reclaimed sands of Montego Bay. There were no leaders, no politicians, just Jamaicans standing together, and from a loudspeaker, someone played an old recording of Ibrahim Traoré's voice, echoing over the waves. If a nation cannot touch its own sand, it is not free. The people cheered. Some wept. Others stood silently, staring at the ocean that had been stolen and now returned. Then, as night fell, a strange light appeared on the horizon, a distant glow moving slowly along the water. It wasn't a ship or a flare. It was a massive projection, broadcast from a Pan-African media group in Burkina Faso. The image showed the Jamaican flag and the Burkinabe flag side by side, with the words, "One struggle, one soul." People shouted, danced, and raised their fists. For the first time, Africa and the Caribbean were truly united not by politicians, but by truth. But while the people celebrated, the former Prime Minister boarded a private plane to London. Beside him sat Sir Alistair Morton, silent and pale. As they ascended into the clouds, Holness whispered, "They'll come for us." Morton replied coldly, "They always do, when they realize they were never meant to win." That was the last anyone ever saw of them. Weeks later, Jamaica announced a new national declaration, the People's Charter for Land and Sea. It banned foreign ownership of beaches and declared every coastline public property. The government was rebuilt from the ground up. And on the anniversary of that day, Jamaicans from every parish gathered on the sand singing, laughing, and touching the water that had once been forbidden. A fisherman, now old and gray, summed it up best when a reporter asked him what freedom felt like. He smiled, scooped up a handful of wet sand, and said, "It feel like this, it feel like home again."